born the daughter of the powerful chieftain of the Quraysh Abu Sufyan. Her frail body, nor father's influence could stop her from accepting Islam. She joined the mothers of the believers and given the glad tidings of paradise. Her name is Habibah, Ramla bint Abi Sufyan. Join us for this amazing new chapter in the hit series, Heroines of Islam, with your host lailanasheeba, Mondays and Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right here on Sunnahfollowers.
Alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam ala wa rasulullah. Alhamdulillah, welcome to our series entitled Heroines of Islam. The Heroines of Islam, and tonight we will be continuing with our example of a true heroine, Habibah, radiyallahu anha. Habibah, who was the daughter of Abu Sufyan, who was one of the leaders of the Quraysh. Habibah, who converted to Islam, who was one of the early people who converted to Islam, her and her husband, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the call to prophethood. Salama, who after her conversion was persecuted, both she and her husband, because even though her father was the leader, a great tribal leader of the Quraysh, he was adamant against Islam, and he even made his daughter and her husband an example of his fury by persecuting them as well. And as a result of that, when Allah sent down the commands for the Muslims to migrate to some place where they could practice their deen freely and openly, Habibah and her husband were amongst the second group to leave Mecca for Abyssinia. And once she and her husband arrived, and she was pregnant at the time. She was pregnant with her child at the time. And then when she arrived in Abyssinia, this is a woman that came from wealth. Her father was Abu Sufyan, a nobleman. She had money. She came from money, but she sacrificed all of that in her quest for love of Allah. But her journey is a journey of patience, because once she arrived in Abyssinia, her husband apostated. He apostated from Islam and converted to the religion of Christianity. And after his apostation, not only was this a problem, but he also had become a drunk, separated from his homeland, no longer able to live the way he lived in Mecca in this strange foreign land. He began to take up drinking. He was driven to the bottle. And after his apostation, he came home and announced it to his wife, and then tried to force her to apostate too. And she had just given birth to her daughter. She refused to apostate. She told her husband she'd rather live in the desert and eat grass than abandon her beautiful way of life. He beat her, and she still refused to apostate, so he left. And it just so happened when he left, he got into a fight and ended up killed. He was killed, thus leaving Habibah alone with a baby to care for. She couldn't go back to Mecca because her father was one of the chiefs. The people in Abyssinia were gossiping because her husband had humiliated them all with his drunkenness. So she secluded into herself, and she called upon Allah for help. She asked Allah to send help, some type of help to her, because no one would marry her. Not because she wasn't beautiful. Habibah was extremely beautiful. After all, she was the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, just like Zaynab was. They were all beautiful, same blood, same family. But the men feared her father. So no one would marry her. And back in those days, if a woman didn't have a husband, she had zero chances of survival. But rather than panic, Habibah remained steadfast and patient. She made dua, asking Allah to change her situation into something better for her and her daughter. And then she went to sleep and had a dream. And in that dream, someone called her by the name Mother of Believers. And that let her know that perhaps Allah did have something better in store for her. And a couple of days later, he did, because the king of the land sent a messenger to inform her that the Prophet Muhammad had sent a letter after hearing about her dilemma, asking for her hand in marriage. So Habibah appointed her cousin as her guardian, her wali, and she and the Prophet were married in the form of a letter. So that shows that you don't have to be present in order to have a valid marriage contract. All you need is a guardian, a dowry, and witnesses, and that's it. But her journey had just begun, because even though she married the Prophet, she was not united with him until 7 years later. But during that time period, the Prophet Muhammad sent money. He sent providence to her, provisions to her every month, every week, as soon as he could. And he cared for her and her daughter for those 7 long years. And then we talked about how after 7 years had passed, that's when the Prophet ordered the Muslims in Abyssinia that it was safe to come back to Medina, not back. But this was during the time that the Prophet fought the Battle of Khaybar. And we talked about how illustrious our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, because the day that Habibah arrived in Medina was the same day that he had married Safiya. Safiya was taken as a captive of war. Okay, the Prophet freed her because she converted to Islam and he married her. And so the Prophet had to deal with Safiya, who was the daughter of a prophet who had just witnessed the death of her husband, her brothers, and her uncles. He had to comfort her. And at the same time, he received news that the wife he married 6 years ago and never got to be with had finally arrived. So after coming back to Medina, he had Safiya stay in a home of one of the Ansar, and he had an apartment prepared for Habibah. Habibah had moved into the apartment and cleaned it up and decorated it while she waited for her husband to be finally united with her husband, after Khaybar. So after the Prophet arrived in Medina, he got Safiya situated, and then at that night, he immediately went to his beautiful wife, Habibah, who he had married 6 years ago. And he was so impressed to see how she had turned that apartment that was nothing but a floor of sand, how she had turned it into a beautiful home, because she had decorated it with carpets and she had put lit incense, and it was clean and fresh and beautiful. He was so amazed that he complimented her and told her only the Quraysh women, only the women of the Quraysh can take a dwelling and turn it into a real home. And so finally, these two were united as husband and wife. And the Prophet was very attentive to Habibah. He was very attentive to her, so much so that her nickname for him was my beloved. And his nickname for her was Habibah, mother of Habibah. That was her daughter's name. But also it was a joke between them because they loved each other so much. She was so easy to get along with. Okay, very easy to get along with because of the trials that Habibah suffered in living in a foreign land, her husband apostating, the fitna of her father, Abu Sufyan, who she loved but couldn't be with. Life mellowed her. She was a very patient woman. So the prophet truly enjoyed her because he was able to, express himself with her. They would laugh together and they were very loving. And she proved how much she loved him when her father, Abu Sufyan, came to visit because of the agreement, the treaty that the Quraysh had broke with the Muslims. Abu Sufyan had heard that his daughter, Habibah, had arrived back from Abyssinia. She hadn't seen her father in years. Okay? He came to her house. He let himself in and he went to sit, and she moved a cushion and said, "You can't sit here." He said, "My daughter, you have changed all these years. Is the cushion too good for me, or am I too good for the cushion?" She said, "The enemy of Allah can never sit where the prophet of Allah sits." So she showed that this was the first time she'd seen her father in years. But again, this is an example of allegiance. Her allegiance, she let it be known to him. My allegiance, my loyalty is to the prophet of Allah, not even to you. So he left. And when the prophet heard what happened, he came rushing home. And he was so proud of Habibah. He held her and he said, "You truly are Habibah." And she said, "You are nothing less than my beloved." That's a beautiful relationship they had. And this is where we stopped off when we met the last time. We talked about this though. There was another woman, Aisha, radiallahu anha. Aisha, who was the jealous wife. Not only did she have to contend with Safiya and Zaynab, because he had just married Zaynab right before Safiya, and now Habibah's here. So the question that comes to mind to everyone is, what happened with her and Aisha? Well, just to let you guys know, a lot of tension. Habibah immediately joined the camp with her cousin, Zaynab. Remember, they were first cousins. I mean, maybe second cousins. They were close. They were related. They were all related to the prophet. Remember, they were cousins. So she immediately attached. And remember, Habibah was married to Zaynab's brother. Y'all remember, Habibah's first husband was Zaynab's brother. So she and Zaynab were close anyway. So when she arrived in Medina, she immediately attached to her cousin Zaynab, who used to be her sister-in-law. So they were very close. Okay. Aisha knew that she would attach to her. And of course, this made Aisha even more jealous because Habibah was beautiful too. They say they all looked alike. Zaynab, Habibah, and Salama, they all resembled, they were all related. They were all, like first, second cousins. Remember, the Prophet Muhammad made dua for Salama. So she didn't get involved in none of the fitna. Plus, they were afraid of her. She was the cousin of Khalid bin Walid. And she was the one that was a warrior. She could work a sword and a bow and an arrow. Didn't nobody bother Salama. But Aisha was very jealous of Habibah. And very jealous, of course, of Zaynab. So let's pick up what happened with these relationships. Let me put the PowerPoint up on the screen. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. Wrong one. Uh-oh. Where's my PowerPoint, guys? Hold on. Here it goes. Wait a minute. Where's my PowerPoint? Do y'all see it on here? Habibah. I got so much on this desktop. Which one says Habibah? Oh, God. Oh, here it is. I got it.
The blue one. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I got it. Woo, girl, I was going to say all that time and I lost my power. Okay. Okay, here we go, guys. So here we go. Habibah. Her reaction upon being reunited with her husband and her interaction with Aisha and other wives shows that she had an impeccable character. First of all, let's take it back a little bit. When she became Muslim, again, she was one of the first to convert to Islam. She dealt with the fitna that her father, Abu Sufyan and Hind and all of them gave her. She left, went to Abyssinia. She handled her husband's apostation. So from all that alone, you guys can see that she was very strong. I tell you all the time, back in the dark ages, only the strong women survived. The weak women didn't survive back in those days. They either died from sicknesses, or they died from being raped, or they died by being killed. Okay? So she was a strong woman, very strong. And like all the other wives of the prophet, she also feared Allah. Again, they were related. And not only that, I tell you guys, Hafsa was one of the few who knew how to read and write. Even our Aisha, radiallahu anha, did not know how to read and write. But that doesn't mean that the other women weren't intelligent. Habibah, she was the daughter of Abu Sufyan. She was the sister of Muawiyah. She was extremely intelligent. She was also clever and she could speak well. She was a very articulate woman. And also, just like Aisha and Salama became two of the first scholars of Islam, Habibah did too. Habibah issued many fatwas before her death. She was a scholar of Islam too. Okay? So let's get into some details about her. When she got back to Medina, Aisha was extremely jealous. Aisha knew that she would attach to Zaynab. They were cousins after all. She was married to her brother and all of that. Habibah, though, had learned patience over the years. She didn't believe in all that drama of arguing. Plus, she was in her late 30s. Remember, Aisha was a teenager. Aisha was around 15 or 16 at this time. Habibah was like 38, in her late 30s. Some say she might have even been 40. Zaynab was in her mid 30s. Remember, Zaynab was 35 when she married the prophet. Well, Habibah, they say, was around 38 years old. So her and Zaynab were close. Salama was in her 30s too. So these were older women. They didn't have, Habibah had patience. She had been through enough drama that she didn't want to deal with Aisha. But she was always there as the confidant for her cousin Zaynab. Zaynab would go over her plans and her feelings about things with Habibah because she trusted her. Okay? So, Habibah, though, even though she had married the prophet 6 years earlier, that she was like a fresh new bride because they had just consummated the marriage. They were just starting to live together. And she was just so happy to finally be with the man that she loved. that whereas her cousin Zaynab was so busy fighting with Aisha, Habibah wanted every other woman that she cared about to feel the happiness that she was feeling. So one day, what Habibah did, and it shows her character. We have this authentic hadith. She said, one day, when my beloved, she referred to the prophet as her beloved, when my beloved came to visit me, I said to him, marry my sister who is also the daughter of Abu Sufyan. And when she said that to him, the prophet looked at her and said, this is strange. He said, aren't you jealous? He said, wouldn't you be afraid or jealous of me if I were to marry your sister? She said, oh, my beloved, I love you more than life. She said, but I desire this because I also want what's best for my sister. She said, I want my sister to be in paradise with me. And I'm willing to even risk sharing you just so my sister can feel what I'm feeling and be in paradise with me. And when she said that, the prophet smiled. He said, first of all, you have to understand. And then he was quiet for a moment. Quiet for a moment. Why was he quiet? Why was he quiet? Because Allah was sending down a new revelation. And this is the story behind this verse of the Quran. He got quiet. And then he looked at her. He said, oh, Habibah, you must understand that your sister is not lawful for me. That's when Allah sent down the verses, letting it be known that a man cannot marry two sisters at the same time. And when he told her that, she said, and this shows how she dealt with Aisha. This is how she played the Aisha game. She said, really? She said, well, I heard, here we go. I heard that you want to marry the daughter of Salama and Abu Salama. Remember, I told you guys that hadith would come back. This was when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, remember, one of his best student was Aisha. His second best student was Salama's daughter. This is when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had ended up spending more time during the day at Salama's house. And remember, Aisha got jealous, her and Hafsa. And remember, Aisha ran to the other wives and said, now look at him. Now he wants to marry, I guess he's going to marry Zaynab now, Salama's daughter. And remember, the Prophet got angry. Well, Aisha had told that to the other wives. Habibah didn't get off of that, but this is how the Prophet found out. He found out about the fitna that Aisha and Hafsa did through Habibah. And she did it in a coy way. She said, but I heard that you want to marry the daughter of Abu Salama, Salama's daughter Zaynab. The Prophet said, what? You heard that I wanted to marry Salama's daughter? And she said, yes. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Salama's daughter is my stepdaughter, who I raised under my own hand. And marrying her is haram. That's when Allah sent down that verse. Not only can a man not marry two sisters at the same time, but he can also not marry his stepdaughter. And then he said, and even if she were not my stepdaughter, He said, Zaynab is not lawful for me to marry because she's the daughter of Abu Salama, and Abu Salama and I are brothers because we were both suckled by the same woman. And he was angry because he didn't know that this is the fitna that Aisha and Hafsa had concocted. They were always coming up with some fitna together. And so she said after he told her that, he looked at her and said, do not offer me any of your daughters or sisters ever again. And that's when he left and went to deal with Aisha. And we talked about that when I did the story of Aisha, how he approached her. She threw it on Hafsa. He got mad at Hafsa and all of that. Okay. So, but that's how, the jealousy was there. Okay. She tried to avoid it, but she was a ear for Zaynab. They were extremely close. She was also close to Salama because they were cousins. They were like first, second cousins. Okay. And that's how she got Aisha back. She was the one, Habibah was the one that slipped it to the prophet that Aisha was saying that he was going to marry Zaynab, Salama's daughter. And the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not happy with that. Okay. Also, just as we talked about how the prophet's wife Sauda used to Sauda and Salama and Zaynab, they used to make clothing out of leather. That's a job they had. They worked making clothing out of leather and selling it for extra money. Well, guess what Habibah did? Habibah was a midwife. Not only did she become a scholar of Islam after the death of the prophet, but she was also a midwife. She worked as a midwife during her marriage to the prophet. This is also how she helped to provide for herself too in Abyssinia. She would work as a midwife, be there to help the women have babies, okay? And also, she was given the good news of paradise by the prophet. Let's talk about that, okay? Habibah, as a scholar, she narrated 65 hadiths, although some of the scholars say it might be more than that too. But she's definitely narrated 65 hadiths from the prophet. And when she reported the hadiths, she would make a wudu. And she would ask the person who was listening to make wudu too, although this is not an obligation in Islam. So if you come upon some people, a lot of you may come to me and say, Sister Layla, my father told me that even when we read the hadiths, we should have wudu. That's not correct. But where your father got that from was this, and this is out of Muwatta, because Habibah, she said you don't have to, but she just felt comfortable. Whenever she talked about the prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this showed her love for him and her respect for him after his death. When she narrated anything from him, she would make wudu, and she would tell whoever she was narrating it to have wudu too. Okay, but that is not an obligation. That's just something that Habibah did, and that's probably where your father got that from. But no, you do not have to have wudu to read the hadiths or recite them. Okay. And also, again, she worked as a midwife. She was the midwife at the birth of Dawood ibn Asim bin Urwa. He was the one who married her daughter, Habibah. Habibah, her daughter Habibah. Habibah, her daughter, married Ibn Urwa. And she was his midwife. Okay, so we deduce from this that she was a midwife for other people as well. And about the hadith that you can find in Muwatta, it's narrated by Ibn Ashkir, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said that Habibah was one of the ones who will be blessed with paradise. Okay? So that's more about her. Now, how long did she and the Prophet get to live together before he died? Because remember, she didn't come until after the Battle of Khaybar. Well, they lived together for 4 years. Remember, we asked that question, Ifti? They were married together 4 years. And she lived 34 years after his death. Okay? And after his death, she was treated with great respect and value. But she came into real power when her brother Muawiyah became the caliphate. When Muawiyah became the caliphate, he was referred to as the uncle of the believers because of her. And he was the one that utilized her a lot for fatwa. The same way Umar, radiallahu anhu, when Umar wanted to, whenever people came to Umar, radiallahu anhu, about issues relating to women, he would refer them to Aisha, radiallahu anha. Okay. And when even with his daughter Hafsa, because Hafsa could read and write, the Umar radiallahu anha would always verify things with Aisha and his daughter Hafsa when it came to the Quran, because Hafsa could read and write. Well, just like he made the use of those two, Muawiyah radiallahu anha made use of Habibah when he was the caliph. He would refer to her. He would refer to her for issues, for verification of issues. Now, a lot of people ask what happened after the Prophet died and when the fitna emerged with Uthman. Habibah did not participate in any of that garbage, guys. However, when Uthman's house was attacked, she went there to visit him, just like Safiya did. And when she entered into the house, one of the renegades pulled off her hijab, and he didn't know who she was. But when the man pulled off her hijab and saw how beautiful she was, he began talking dirty about what he could do with her, because Habibah was beautiful. And when he did that, she looked at him and she said, "What is going on here? May Allah take away your hand. Leave this area of mahram." And then one of the slaves, who was Uthman's slave, took a sword and cut the man's hand off, because that slave knew who Habibah was. He cut the man's hand off for pulling off her hijab. And when the man lost his hand, he began to run away. And Allah fixed him because his gown exposed his private part. So that's what happened when she went to visit Uthman. You know, this guy pulled off her hijab, and you know how they did back then. "Oh, what I'm gonna do with you? You're fine." You know, women were chattel back then. Okay. But the slave took off his hand for doing that, and Allah exposed the man's genitals. So that's what happened during the fitna with Uthman, because she, just like Safiya, they were trying to bring food to sneak food into Uthman, but the renegades wouldn't allow them. So Safiya was the one that built a bridge from her home to Uthman's to sneak food from above. Okay. Because they were cousins. For all of you who don't know, Habibah, Zaynab, Hafsa, Aisha, they were all cousins. They were the Quraysh. Uthman, they were all related to each other. They were all cousins from the same tribe, same family. Okay. So what happened to Uthman impacted them on many levels. Okay, a lot of people ask how old was Habibah when she died? She died at the age of 70, and she died during the reign of her brother Muawiyah. So she had a good life. She lived with her brother when Muawiyah became the caliphate over the Muslims. You know, he took care of her. Okay, and he took care of all the wives of the prophet. Okay, so what lessons do we learn from Habibah? Well, number one, she was one of the first to embrace Islam. And just like others, she set aside her nobility, her wealth, and all of that for Allah. She chose the hereafter over the life of this world. Okay? And despite all the torment and oppression she went through, she remained true to her faith, which is something that's admirable for us all. And also, she's an example as to how life and its hardships can mold us and shape us into better people. Because again, the little 4 years that she spent with the prophet, you know, she didn't get into much fitna. She was the one that told what Aisha said about Salama's daughter, but that's all. You know, she tried to avoid that conflict. She wanted to make the best and the most of her time with the Prophet Muhammad. And that's something that we women can benefit from. You know, don't waste our time. Life is short. Grab each day by its horns and make the most and the best of each day. Don't waste it with argumentation and jealousy and all that trivial stuff. Okay? Also, she proved once again what true well better is. She chose Allah and his prophet over her father. She would not allow her father to sit and make himself at home in the home of the prophet when he was an enemy to him. Okay? And also we learn from her that a woman's priority should be the home. When she arrived in Medina, the first thing she did was turn that little bitty hole into a home. That's our job as women. You know, turn our houses into homes. Make it peaceful. Make it luxuriant. Make it beautiful for our children, ourselves, and our husbands. That's what women are supposed to do. It's our job to make everything beautiful. Seriously, that's my job. That's your job. Our job is to make everything beautiful. Ourselves, our homes, our children, so that our husbands in turn can come home and relax and enjoy. Subhanallah, subhanallah. So basically, guys, that's the story of Habibah, you know, the daughter of Abu Sufyan, the sister of Muawiyah, you know, cousin of Zaynab, cousin of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, cousin of Salama. You know, they say she was a beauty and she was sweet, real sweet, a nice, caring, sweet woman. Okay, are there any questions?